morning. Hope you can you hear me through the mask? Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Mike Snap. I'm the president of the board. So why are we here today? Well, thinking back to my old Air Force days, it was called Death by Dewgraph. Today it's Death by PowerPoint. But what we're gonna do is talk about the upcoming Special Taxing District, STD, that's coming up. It'll be effective over the next 5 fiscal years, it actually starts in July this year, which is the beginning of FY23 for us. Okay. So I know when I moved in here, I said, why do we have STDs? Well, primarily it's called out in Calvert County Code, which is a sub-element of the state code, which basically provides for the financing of services for communities that don't have county or state road maintenance and other support. So that's what it's for. So like for us, we do all of our own roads, do all of our own storm cleanup, do all that stuff that we as a community have to pay for. So the STD is a way for the county to collect that money and then manage it and give it out to us as needed. Let me break for a second. The board is sitting behind you, so they'll be throwing things at me, but it's not a formal meeting, it's just an information meeting leading up to the start of the STD. Okay, so what does that amount to? Well, the biggest chunk of it is for roads and other right-of-way type issues, storm cleanup, and that sort of thing. And it's prescribed on what we can spend it on. And I'll go into more detail on that in a couple of minutes. But it's not a pot of money they just give us, and we just willy-nilly do whatever we want to do. It also provides for things like lakes and canals. We don't have a lot to do with that, other than occasionally a storm cleanup type issue in our right-of-way, or drainage problems. We frequently have that down on Bay Drive on the causeway. Lake Charming sometimes will plug up on the outlet that feeds that pond in and out. So occasionally we'll have to go in and clean up something like that. Then also, I highlighted, it also includes other community-wide amenities. And we'll see how that factors into it here in a minute. Okay, how's it collected? Well, most of you probably know, but if you don't, once it's approved, once the amount is approved, then it will show up on your real estate taxes, on your property taxes. And it'll show up as a separate line item, STD. It's, in addition to your property taxes and the other waste fees and things like that they collect. So you'll see that, and it's billed right along with the property tax. Then once we have the approved STD, the county then distributes and monitors the spending of it. So as we take care of roads and other problems, essentially we communicate with the county and we get portions of that funding over the year. It's not all given out in one chunk. And if we're under or over, there's some ability to, flexibility in it, but it basically covers all that stuff. If we have unused funds, they can basically forward finance that to the next year. During that STD period, they can put it into reserves, or they can and occasionally refund it. They don't like to do that because it's an administrative nightmare, but they can. If we were way under and what was allocated, they could actually refund that to the individual households. I haven't seen that happen. I have seen it reduced. I'll show you how that works. Okay, so the history of ours, starting with STD 1, which started in FY97, and at that time it was a 4-year plan. that started out, the annual amount per lot basically was 163. And you'll see what happened to it over the years. In '01 it went up to 198, then it went up to 192 in '05. Then you say, well, what happened here? Well, this was a case where the reserves, or our reserves, had built up to the point that the county looked at it and said, you don't need all that money that we had allocated in the STD. So they lowered the subsequent years to $50. So you see that they do actively manage it, and if there is excesses, they will adjust it. Then it went to 166, starting in FY13. And during this time frame, 13 to 17, is when we made some changes in how we collect other fees. Historically, we had a covenant fee that went way back to the founding of the community. It was $10 a year per lot. It never changed. Well, do the math. $10 doesn't do much for it. Okay? And there was no provision to increase it. And we had dues, which was voluntary. Well, how do you run something with that kind of a concept? People just said, well, I don't feel like paying it. Oh, okay. You know, I grew up I was used to the concept where if you belonged to an HOA, you had an obligation to pay those fees. Well, this was voluntary. You can't run something like that. So during that time frame, in 14 and 15, the board and the community accepted the idea that we would allow the covenant fees to increase with the consumer price index. So that allows it to adjust with inflation or with increasing costs. So I'll show you what that is now. Then the other year, we made the dues mandatory, called it a mandatory assessment, and this was all legally approved, and all with the county and the community and the board. So that allowed us to have a more controllable income stream that we could use for all the maintenance in the community. So when we did that, the fee went from 166 and reduced to 115. So the last STD, the one we're currently on, was billed at 115 a lot. What we're requesting now is 175, and I'll show you why. That's for the 5-year period going 23 to 28. Okay. A little bit of an eye chart, hopefully you can see it, but this is, the first column here was our current STD over the full 5-year period. So these are the total costs that we've incurred. So you can see that was billable to the STD. Part of the way we run this is we have the STD, which is limited to certain types of projects. Then we have the mandatory assessment that adds to that, and the covenant fees that add to it. We also get a little bit of state money called SURE. It's only about $40,000, but it provides some additional road maintenance funds. Okay, so if you look down the column, you'll see essentially what we paid for. The biggest chunk is for our road paving. Our plan, what we've been trying to execute, we have about 15 miles of roads in the community. We try to pave or rejuvenate approximately 1 mile a year. It varies a little bit depending on the specific road and the need on those roads, the cost of asphalt, etc. So anyway, that's the biggest chunk. Some of the other ones, you notice, like snow removal, $65,000. Stormwater, $25,000. Those are the biggest ones that come out of the STD. Now, the last column is what we're proposing for this next period. And this, again, this is not year per year, this is 5 years. And you say, well, why is snow going from 65 to 139? Well, because we don't know how much snow removal we're going to need. Last year we had hardly any. This year we've already had like 1.5. I think, what was it, Rhea, $25,000
Yes.
to plow?
Yes.
Essentially, it's about $25K for each plowing episode that we have. So how many of those are going to have in a year? Well, I don't know. You look at the caterpillars, you look at the acorns, you try to predict. But so that's why that's projected that way. Why did street lighting go from 4 to 73? Well, the county used to provide essentially most of our street lighting. And then, what was it?
About 3 years ago.
3 years ago, they started pulling out and said, you got to pay for your own. Well, that was phased in over time, but now we have to pay for all of our street lighting. We have to pay SMECO, basically. So that, we had to increase that to account for the increased cost of the street lighting. Paving, 657 to 773, that's about the same. And when you look at it over time. Stormwater, like snow, we have no control over that. We can't predict how much storm damage we're going to have and how much repairs we have to do. Okay, now the last one, this is a new one. We've been talking over the past, year, basically, about the need to try to do something to preserve our community beach down on Beach Drive. And the plan we've come up with is essentially a rock spur that will go out and protect at least the upper part of the beach and do some remediation on the beach, put in some vegetation, and try to control what's going on out there. Well, we've got enough reserves built up to handle a little more than half of that. So in this, we're asking the county to approve $60,000 over 5 years. So that's $12,000 a year. We have a little bit, right around 1,200 collectible lots. You know, once we figure out, how many people pay and don't pay. So we have a little over 1,200. So it ends up, that's about $10 a year that increases the STD. Now, we don't know. This is going to go to the county. And I'll talk about how that works here in a second. But that's our projected budget, what we're asking for in the next 5-year STD. Okay, this is just more of a graphic. This is our covenant fees. This is our mandatory assessment. This is the STD, and that's total. The orange, basically, that's all of the sticks and stones and paving and asphalt. That's all the O&M that goes into the community. The blue is the administrative chunk. Well, you look at the STD, that's only about 3%. That's basically just to manage, thank God we got Rhea, to manage our funds and expenditures and projects. So there's a little bit of her time that goes on for that. No?
It's for the audit, strictly for the audit.
Well, that's just the audit? Oh, okay, so it's even less. So they basically say, we can't pay for the management of those funds. It's very well described. So some people have been concerned about that. Are we using too much money for management? Well, we're taking the management money, most of it out of the mandatory assessment and the covenant fees. So what about this $60,000 beach project? Well, the total estimated cost right now is about $143,000. We put $60,000 in the STD. That $10 a lot, like I said. Now, we have applied for a state grant. The people have told me, DNR people have told me, they think we've got a decent chance, but we don't know. And it could be reduced. Moreover, we're not gonna know until probably early summer. Well, the STD process is already gonna happen. So, we've talked to the county, told them what we're doing, and they have agreed that if we get any funding, that they will reduce the following year's STD assessment by that amount. So it's not like, if we're able to get this grant, and I hope we do, or at least some, that will reduce future year STDs. Okay, so what does this do to you? The STD is $175, it's off of that other chart. That's what we're proposing. In addition to that, mandatory assessment is $55 a year for our developed lots, $10 or $20 for undeveloped lots. And then the covenant fee, that's gone up to $117 this year, was $110, but it went up with the price index. So the total, $347 a year for a developed lot, $312 for an undeveloped lot. By comparison, CRE, Ranch Estate, they're doing $275 a year per lot, plus on the order of $500 for their other fees. So they're looking at $775 in that neighborhood. So roughly twice, or a little over twice what we're paying. Maryland's average HOA fees about $250 a month. And like I say, that's apples and oranges. A lot of HOAs do yard maintenance and any number of things. They have pools or whatever. But it's just to give you an idea of comparison. So really, Drum Point is not doing too bad for the services we get. I think that our $350 a year is not bad. Now, you can argue with the county about why they do this and all that. I can't answer that for you, but that's
Their HOA fees, are those in addition to the STD, correct? So they're paying,
Yeah.
$250 plus.
yeah, the management
Whatever
assessment.
their STD is.
Yeah, we have the STD, which is billed on the tax, and then RIA bills the mandatory assessment and the covenant fee.
So statewide average would be like $425. Yeah.
What's that?
So if you add their HOA fee to the STD, that was.
Well, no, like I said, it's really apples and oranges. This is just to give you an indicator of other average fees. We don't know what that includes. I mean, if they're in a county or state maintaining road system, they're not paying an STD, but they're paying other fees. All I was trying to show was just that $350 is not bad when you look at comparable figures. Okay, so what's going to happen? Well, we're here today just as an information meeting, show you what we're proposing, give you a chance to ask questions or comments or whatever. This is all going to be posted, or is posted on the website, and I'll put a link to that code. I showed you the Maryland code. I'll put a link on our published version of this briefing on there, so if you want to look at that whole code, if you're bored, or it's snowing or something, you want something to do, that's one thing you can do. You can email questions to us at their Drum Point email. Okay, main thing though, March 15th, and Reed's been putting out information on this already. March 15th, 7 in the evening, probably at the community center up at Southern Pines. There will be a meeting with the Board of County Commissioners. There'll be a public, open hearing with them to go over this, discuss this with them. They will have an opportunity to hear from you or any of the other community. And based on all that, they'll make their decision on how much. And then, if anything is approved, that'll show up on the taxes coming up for next year. that's essentially our information, so, yeah.
I'd just like to add, Mike, that since we don't have an STD, we also get part of the gas tax that you pay at the pump.
Yeah, that's the 40, I think I mentioned 40K for
40K.
sure.
And then,
That's the-
did you mention also
Okay.
about the FEMA?
No, I did not.
Which
Go
makes
ahead.
us, should the worst happen and we have a hurricane here, something, we get substantial damage. And I think we got FEMA for Isabel.
For Isabel, excuse me, for Isabel and for a snowstorm in recent years.
Oh, yeah, it's just,
We
even
were-
a snowstorm.
I think we
can
spent 120, maybe thousand on snow removal that year. For that duration of the FEMA funded, we were 80% reimbursed for that because we're eligible for FEMA.
But the STD helps us qualify
Yes,
for that.
exactly.
right? If we didn't have the STD, then we'd be in more of a limbo situation
On our own.
on our own, basically. Yes,
I understand why the STD is going up. This is kind of off the subject, but what they were going to do to the beach, is that in collaboration with the environmental resources people?
well, I mean, we have to work with Maryland Department of Environment and DNR to get the permits. And, you know, they've already essentially looked at our project, and we've met with them, showed them what we're thinking of the beach, got their input. We're working with it's a marine environmental construction firm in Virginia. It's done a lot of this work that you see, like over at the base, some of the things they've done to protect the beaches, Patterson Park, Asbury, several projects up in Potomac. So they have a lot of experience. Their leader is actually is an adjunct professor at the Virginia Institute of Marine Science. So he kind of knows what he's doing. And they're working with us on the design. And then once we get to the point when we have some funding approved, then we'll go out for bids for the actual rock and construction.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, none of this will happen without MDE and DNR weighing in on it and, you know, issuing permits.
Thank you.
Yes.
Now, and with like street lighting, is that strictly for maintenance, or are they planning on adding street lights at some point?
That's just the light bill.
Just the
That's just the electricity.
And if, you know, if a bulb is out and you call, or I call, and it's replaced, and, you know, it's all covered under that. But that's really just the electric bill.
Okay, so you're not gonna be
No.
adding to the number of street lights.
Now, SMECO will
We
work
have
with
82
us on,
lights.
you know, maintenance issues and things like that, but we don't have any plans right now to increase them. If you want your own street light, you can work with SMECO, and they'll work with you and provide poles and lights or whatever.
It would be built
You know,
on
and
an
then
individual.
I'll send you the bill, but. Yes, sir.
The stormwater, I think it was 125,000, is what it turned out to be. Is that an after the fact, after there's been a storm, is that all cleanup, or is there preventative in
A
there?
lot of it is, but there are some preventive things we do. We work on culverts, making sure that those are kept clean. You know, if you see any issues like that where you see things backing up, let us know. So we do take some preventive measures, to keep things open. But, you know, some of it is obviously just storm cleanup. So storm water, we also have, doesn't really show in here, but we have, you know, we also do have budgeted money for the actual storm cleanup, trees and things, like after this last snowstorm. We get a lot of community, well, not community, government support. Fire department helped us clear trees. SMECO helped us clear things, get things off lines. But still, once the debris is all cleared, we still have to go in and clean up the right of ways and, get rid of the excess and stuff like that. So that's all part of our storm cleanup process. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about the paving and rejuvenation.
Yeah.
Are there any thoughts about adding to the bike lanes? I know there are some parts, like when we walk, that there is no room, for pedestrian walking, so I was wondering if.
If we don't, that would have to be, it's a worthwhile thing, but, we have, we only have so much right of way. The cost of that would be high, to do it. I do a lot of bike riding myself. I found that most of our streets are easy to navigate. I find that most people are pretty courteous, and if you're courteous to them, most of them are courteous back. I ride a lot on Rousby Hall and Route 4, and the shoulders there are great, so right now I doubt that anything would happen. Rhea?
If I could just add, I think a lot of people would object in that they view that unpaved right-of-way as their yard. And it is, but not really. Technically, it just isn't. You can't put a fence there, we don't want you to put shrubbery that might have to encroach on the road, then we'll trim it away, and, there'll be a whole thing. So people have, these are somewhat smaller lots, and I can imagine there'd be some objections by some if we went in and said, well, we're gonna widen this and make it into a bike lane. I understand, but this is an old community. It wasn't laid out to accommodate that kind of thing.
And if you travel around, go to cities and stuff, even the ones that are very out ahead, things like bicycle safety and lanes and things like that, those are mostly on main roads. If you get back into residential areas, you don't see that kind of stuff. It's like Rhea said, but most of the time you just don't have the room. And you're dealing with people generally, hopefully, staying at 25 miles an hour or under, and so if you're safe, you're probably, if you practice good safety measures, they probably will too, most of the time. There's always an exception. Wear your helmet. Yes, sir.
My lot is on the corner of Anchor Drive and Mill Creek Drive there, and that pond that's down behind, storms have knocked a couple of trees down in there now.
We got that on our list, that's our.
Oh, the trees.
Not if it's going into the water?
It's into the water.
No, we don't have that on the list.
Oh, in the water?
No.
Okay.
We had, that happen on Vista Pond on
Okay.
Riverview,
Okay.
and we had Robin Munnekeisen, who was a critical area
Yeah,
person,
that's-
look at it, and she prefers that they stay.
Okay, so, and I wasn't saying somebody should come in,
Oh.
or do they need to be cleaned up? Should they be cleaned up? And I guess being, with the state laws being what they are, can they be cleaned up?
Well, I think they can, in particular if they were going to like break away and maybe, come down and clog the drain or something like that.
They are down, the one especially is down in that corner.
Is it?
And then the other one is just down a little farther. I don't know as far as when they start to deteriorate, what's gonna happen to the branches that they break off, but yeah, there is stuff that is kind of building up in that corner.
Well,
We can have it looked at.
we can look at it.